Okay, so this morning we're going to talk about the cycle of dysfunction and sin, and I want to take us to a foundational verse to open our conversation today. It's from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5, and I want to start in verse 8. This is a part of the Ten Commandments. And it says, "You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind, or an image of anything in the heavens or on earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation." And so, what does it mean then to visit the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations? We want to talk about that today. That's why we call it a cycle, because it gets passed along from generation to generation. This cycle of dysfunction, and then our sinful responses to that keep getting passed along. You know, praise God that there is a God who intervenes and breaks that cycle, but we have to understand what the cycle is so that we can know how to go about breaking the cycle. And so it begins relationally, and so I hope you don't mind if we have a conversation this morning. So let's start with a relationship. And so think about those of you who are in relationship, who may be married or whatever. What were the qualities that you looked for in a relationship with the one you love? What were you looking for? So you speak and we'll write. Humility, okay. What else? Respect.
I would just call it flow.
Flow. I don't think I've ever heard that one before, but that's cool. You've heard that one before?
No, that's cool.
I like it. What else? What were you looking for?
Honesty.
Honesty. Kindness. Dependability. Openness. Unity. Good, good. I'm sorry?
Faithfulness.
Reliability. Faithfulness. Love? What's that got to do with relationships? I like that one, love. Yeah, we've done it, and people haven't listed that one sometimes. Patience. Very good. I like your list. It's a great list of qualities that you want in people. So, let's assume that all these qualities exist and that the two get married. Okay? Do you want these qualities to be mutual or just one direction? Mutual, right? So you want to be able to give and to receive them. So let's assume then that as a result of this marriage, there are children that come in to the picture. A little girl, a little boy, a little baby. I mean, we have children in the picture. And one of the things about children is that they are meant to be loved. Would you agree? I mean, the Bible says that God is love. The essence of God's character is that He is love. But love does not exist alone. Love has to pour itself into a recipient. So in a marriage, you pour love into one another, but parents then, when they have children, are meant to pour love into their children. And does it stand to reason then that the children need to be loved in order to learn how to love themselves? And so children have what we call basic love needs. And Bev is going to talk with you about some of those love needs. What are the needs that children have that their parents are designed by God to fulfill, to meet? And so we're going to start there next.
Good morning. I like to think of this picture when children are born in relationship. I like to think of this picture that the job, the role of a parent is, in Christian homes, is to take the hand of God and then take the hand of the child and connect the two and step out of the way. And that child, because mom and dad, with their hands in that child's hands, have taught them, and they understand, wow, looking at mom and dad, I have a picture of this God, and mom and dad teach them about God, and it's very easy to make that connection. I would propose to you, I have to say this before I forget, I would propose to you that when that has not happened, when mom and dad have not done a good job of connecting us with God and stepping out of the way, as a child, my focus then gets stuck on trying to get these love needs met from my mother and my father. And so as we go through these love needs, I want you to think of that idea that sometimes you hear people talk about, well, this happened in my home and this happened with my mother and my father, and I want them, my mother and my father, to be my mother and father. And their eyes are stuck on what mommy and daddy should have done instead of looking to see that only God can meet those needs. The first love need is that of affection, and affection and nurture. We coined that term because it's this affection and nurture idea includes love, of course, but how a child is nurtured in this love, how this child is wrapped in this love and enveloped in this love is a very affectionate thing. When a child is born, the first thing that happens, of course, is that the parents, mom specifically, for the most part, feeds this child, and most mothers, or many mothers, breastfeed. And so in that breastfeeding act, not only is food or milk being transferred, but this sense of affection and nurture in this act of mother holding this baby and holding this baby close to her heart. There is in this child this sense that I'm safe and the world is all right. And so this experience is very important. Psalm 22 says something very important. It says, "Thou didst make me to trust while at my mother's breast." And Psalm 22 is often referred to as a messianic psalm, and the idea that even Jesus had to learn to trust. And that happened during this time when mother was feeding him. That experience of, wow, I am cared for, I'm tenderly attended to, and affection is transferred. We talked a little bit about neuroscience, and we're going to scatter that throughout our discussions this weekend. But one very important thing we know is that before a child can even has words to articulate their experience growing up in homes. Last night we talked about our first experience of relationship happens in the home. Our first experience of community happens in the home. And we grow up and we take that, we have that stamped in our heads, in our brains, that this is what community looks like. And we bring it wherever we go. In fact, we know that where there are more than 3 people that gather together, you automatically, unconsciously assume the role that you had in your family. Take that. You automatically, unconsciously, the role you assumed in your family, the role you had in your family, you automatically do that. You don't think about it, it's just you have that blueprint there. And so my experience of affection and nurture, I know that it's very important, and this child is getting that from mom and dad, and he doesn't have the words to say, mom, this feels good, but our emotional states are transferred to the child even from the time of in utero, once that brain is developed, and the early parts of our lives. It's very fascinating. In domestic violence, if you have children in the home and children witness domestic violence, for a lot of years, we thought that the child who was older, maybe 8 or 10, who witnessed the domestic violence occurring, we thought that there were more devastating effects on that older child. What scientists know today is that even in infancy, in fact, in infancy, it's more devastating for a child who has experienced, cut off, but a child who's really been poured into, love has been poured into, this affection and nurture, have the ability to have their hearts open, and they have what we call warmth of personality, and they're spontaneous, and they have freedom of spirit. When that love need is not met, they have an inability to trust, and I don't care how much you sing, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." Those first formative years will really determine how easy it is for you to do that. And you have what we call coldness of heart. And by that I mean we really have no empathy, no sympathy for other people. And then we also perform to get our needs met. If I do this or if I do that, then maybe my mother or my father will love me as I need to be loved. And so that's the very first love need. The second love need is affirmation. Every child needs to be affirmed. As I told you in my story last night, I became an Adventist at age 14. After becoming pregnant at 13 and having a baby at 14, I joined the church, came into the church, and people did not, welcome me in the church because I didn't have a pedigree. And I came in with this infant, and people thought, "Is that your brother?" No, it's not my brother. But I came into church in a large church where it was fairly conservative and very, I would say, not very, but legalistic. And one of the things that I remember hearing is, never tell your children that they're handsome or they're cute or they are doing a good job, or just don't affirm them, because you don't want your children to have a big head and you don't want them to develop pride. And so in that environment, I certainly grew up. I was never affirmed. I mentioned again in my story last night, if I had to read 5 books, I'd read 10 books. Maybe somebody would notice me. If I would, if I did well in school, maybe my parents would say, "Hey, I'm so proud of you. You're a very bright girl." I didn't get those kind of affirmations. But it's so cool to see that Jesus himself was affirmed by his Father, not once, but twice. He said, "This is my beloved Son, and in whom I am well pleased." The Father said that to Jesus. And so when you look at your life, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, I want you to be thinking life as we're going down this list of love needs. It's easy to think about what I did or didn't do with my children, but I want you to think about this for yourself. And so Jesus was affirmed by his Father. And how many of you all heard words of affirmation? I got to tell you a funny story again. I mentioned that I didn't have a blueprint or a template in my own experience. And when David began this hot pursuit of me, and he started calling me on the phone, and one night I mentioned I really have to go. I was in school at the time, and I have to go. And he said, "Okay, PP, I'm going to let you go." Now, does anybody know what a PP is? I didn't know what a PP is either. And as I mentioned last night, David is not the kind of white man that looks like he's interested in a black woman. And so when he said that, I thought, what in the world is he saying? I was like, what? Did I miss something? I don't understand. What is he saying to me? And I asked him, pardon me? And he said, "Oh, you don't know what a PP is?" I said, "No." And he said, "You're a precious person." I hurried up and got off the phone because no one had ever called me precious. I love Isaiah 40 through 45, and it talks about, in that section, it talks about, "Since thou was precious in my sight, and I have loved you." I would read right over that text because I had no template in my mind to think that I myself was precious. Well, now I'm a bronze beauty, I'm a graceful gazelle, I'm a leopard lily, and we've kind of gone down through the alphabet through the years, and he's come up with these titles, and I'm affirmed all the time in this relationship, and it's so very cool. It has just really caused me to blossom. And I make it a habit every day to seek to affirm someone. We travel a lot, as you can imagine, and if I'm in the airport and the cleaning people are there in the bathroom, I will stop and say, "Hey, thank you for doing a good job of keeping the bathroom clean." And they'll look at me like I'm crazy, like, "Who are you talking to?" Because first of all, people are running in and out and they don't typically notice them. But here I am saying, "Hey, thank you for doing a good job." Or I will stop someone and say, "You are very handsome," or "You are very beautiful." And let me tell you what people typically do with that. You probably are guilty of it yourself. People will say, "Oh, well, thank you. And you're very beautiful too." And what I say is, wait. The next time you see me, you can tell me how beautiful I am, but today you're the beautiful one. People struggle with affirmation. They just don't know what to do with it. Again, many of us have not had someone to say, "Hey, I'm so glad you're my son." We told our children that. I told my oldest son that, and he's told his children that, and he told his children how important it was to him that I would say things like, "You know, if you weren't my son, I would still like you. I think you're just the coolest guy." And both all of our children are pretty good looking. And our youngest son is very handsome. And I used to tell him all the time, "You are the finest man I know." But I would tell him, with that comes responsibility. You need to be a safe man, because people are going to be looking at the outward package and miss you. And they're going to approach you. Women are going to approach you. But I want you to know, you heard it from your mama first. And very important. I love you. I think you're the bomb. We do that even today. We affirm our children. How many of you all have been affirmed like that? How many of you all think you're the best thing since sliced bread because your mama and your daddy told you that?
Well, the truth of the matter is that research shows that we receive about 9 negative messages about ourselves for every 1 positive message. And if you've been told or have internalized, "You're dumb, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're no good, I didn't want you anyway, you're just like your mama or your daddy." All of those negative messages we internalize, particularly as children. Children don't have the capacity to sort it out and say, "Well, that's not true, I'm not going to believe that." If mama or daddy say it, they're going to probably internalize it as if it's true. And a lot of us just carry that baggage of shame along with us And it's very hard to undo the brain pathways that are formed by those negative messages.
Right. And even more importantly, what they didn't say. How many parents just didn't say anything, you know, up or down? They didn't say, I like you, I don't like you. They just were neutral about you. Again, the damage that is done is really important. And when that love need is not met, we have this sense of shame, and hopefully I'll be able to weave some of the concepts of shame, very powerful message that we get about shame and our value and our worth. And with the entrance of sin into the world, shame came into the world as well. Shame is about hiding. Shame is about breaking of relationship and community. And that's exactly what Adam and Eve did. They started hiding with the fig leaves, and they broke community with God. And so the nature of shame is that I don't measure up, I'm not good enough. And that's the message we get when our parents don't affirm us and let us know that we are someone that they love and care for. When that love need is not met, as I mentioned, we develop shame, and we also develop this neediness or rejection of neediness. Have you ever met people who just have a big N on their chest? They're so needy, they're very draining, they just need so much from you. And most of us try to run away from those people. But if the truth be told, the reason why we run is because that's our neediness on full display. We have our neediness, though, on lockdown, and we don't let it out like this person. And why can't they lock down their neediness like I do? Or you can be perhaps like David, who didn't have any needs. And I remember when we first got married, I bought him this lovely coat on sale, a leather coat. It was just absolutely beautiful. The store was going out of business. I got a great deal on it, and I brought it home. And he was like, "What did you buy me this coat for?" Well, I was so excited. It's just, I love doing things for him. And he was like, "Well, yeah, I've never had a coat this nice before in my life." And, you know, he was looking at it, and the first time he wore it, he said this, you know, people said, "Hey, David, that is a beautiful coat." And the first thing he said was, "My wife got a great deal on it. It was a sale coat." You know, well, just the
Well, I was raised with a poverty mentality. You know, hand-me-downs, that's what I was used to.
Yeah.
So it's just translated that way.
Yeah. And so this whole, I don't have any needs, or, you know, the nerve of me having needs or wanting something nice, you know, just wasn't on his repertoire. And so when we have that love need met, we develop self-respect and dignity, and we have a sense of personal value, and we learn that it's okay to be who God made us. The third love need is attention. Several years back, there was this movement underfoot that I guess as more and more women were going into the workforce, the idea was children would be okay with quality time. So let's give our kids quality time, not so much quantity, but quality time. And that's really important. And the average dad, I don't remember, David, what the numbers
27 seconds.
27 seconds they spend with their children a day. And it's like, that's pretty incredible, right? But if, quote unquote, you can make that quality time. But I remember when the pendulum swung back the other way, and Time magazine had this huge article and on the front page, you know, the myth about quality time. Children need not only quality time, but quantity time. They need a parent to pour into them in terms of time as well. You are of value to me. I can enter into your world. I can spend time with you and learn what's important to you and relate to you and really connect with you and spend time with you. Time means something to a child. Time means something to us. I was telling David how much I appreciate, you know, our time up here, and we're going to go up to Banff tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow morning and just, you know, spend some time together, and it's just really cool. Time means something. That's what children need. Time, quality time, and attention, a parent who can get down and relate to them. How many of you all were raised in a home where it's better to be seen and not heard? Yeah. The message is go someplace and sit down. Children don't get fed first. You go over there and sit down, and you wait till the adults talk. And we just, again, the culture that many of us came from, it was just like kids don't matter. They don't have a voice. But that is a love need that we have, that God planted in us, and that is a part of what he did with Adam and Eve. He came and spent time with them. The ebb and flow of God connecting with Adam and Eve and then pulling away for a time and connecting with them. So when he came back to the garden and found that, discussed with them about the sin, there was a time of separation, but then there was a time of togetherness. So God, in essence, spent time with Adam and Eve. And so all children need attention. And when that love need is met, we learn it's okay to be a child, and it's okay to have desires. And the more a very important message is, I'm enjoyable to be with. When that love need is not met, we have difficulty playing, and we're overly serious, and we have narcissistic tendencies, or we have no desires at all. And so either one of those extremes is what happens when that love need is not met. And again, I would implore you, as we're going through these love needs, to think about what happened for you. What did you get? Really important, we're taking the time here, because as we build the case about the dysfunction that happens, you can see that the source of it will be right here in these love needs. The fourth love need is that of protection. All children need to be protected, and not only in terms of physical protection. Johnny, don't run out in the street, look both ways when you walk across the street. Very important, but we also need emotional protection. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to or connected with, in my counseling practice, as well as just as we've gone around the country and done seminars, and people talk about, wow, I wasn't protected by my mother. She didn't really care for me. And again, the trauma of sexual abuse, mom not protecting. How many of you all knew that your mama and your daddy had eyes in the back of their head, especially mom? I mean, for some reason, again, that's that magical thinking as children we engage in. We think that they have eyes in the back of their head, and not knowing that we're just as transparent as we could be, but, they see around corners and all that. Well, the question becomes, if you can see, you have eyes in the back of your head, you can see around corners, why didn't you see what happened to me? Why didn't you see when the lights went out in my eyes, when these terrible things were beginning to happen to me? And I can assure you that the lights go out in our eyes when we have been the recipient of sexual abuse, physical abuse. The lights go out. Our spirits are damaged, and the lights go out in our eyes. And so, huge thing, where is the protection? The emotional protection, very important. I love children. I love getting down on their level and playing with them. And I travel, and I'm all in parents' business. When they talking to kids, I'm talking to kids, and I just love them. I just love watching them. They're just so fascinating to me. And when I watch them and how they move around, and people will say, well, go give Auntie Bev a hug. And maybe they don't want to hug Auntie Bev. And can that be all right? And so when parents insist that you go hug Auntie Bev, I am very quick to say, no, you do not have to. You don't feel like it, and I'm not mad at you. It's all right with me. You don't have to hug me. There are times when I don't want to hug. There are times when I don't want to talk. Can it be all right for a child to have that same kind of feeling reality? Not today, not this hour. Last week we were at a graduation dinner celebration, and this little girl was sitting on the couch. She had a dress on. She was sitting so nice, and I tried to engage her, and she wasn't engaged. And a couple minutes later, she was just having fun, and she had on a dress that swirled around and made this big loop, and I just fussed over her, and I was having a great time with her. Her grandmother came over and said, go over there and sit down and be a good little girl. And her countenance just fell. And not one for being quiet. I said, she was being great. We were having such a great time. And that was the most I could say. But you could just see the countenance fall on this little girl's face when it wasn't okay for her to be a little girl. And some way, somehow, you know, she was denied that privilege. And so emotional protection is very important. We used to tell our son, it's okay if you're upset with me. You can be upset, you just can't be disrespectful in sharing that. Mommy, I'm mad at you. Okay, let's talk about it. Or it's just not fair that this is happening. Okay, let's talk about it. That you can have any kind of feeling reality because I have any kind of feelings. They come up, feelings just are. They're not up for negotiation, they just are. And our children have a right to that as well. And providing protection to let children know that it's okay to feel. Our job as parents is to teach them how to do it appropriately. There's nothing wrong with feelings. We just have to appropriately express them. They don't control our lives, and we can teach children that. And so protection is very important. When we get that love need met, we are secure. We have a sense of security. We have a sense of morality, and we have healthy personal boundaries. People often ask, I just talked with a woman a couple weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, who was sexually abused by an elder in her church from 11 to 21 a day. On her wedding day, she was still being sexually abused, right? He was still being inappropriate. She had no sense of personal boundaries. She didn't know what to do. You know, he came up and you know, it was just inappropriate. She didn't know what to do. She had no sense of personal boundaries. And when that love need is met, we learn that it's okay to talk about problems. It's okay to talk about what's going on. There are a lot of families, and we're going to talk about rules that happen in families in a minute, but when it's not okay to talk about what's going on, not a good sign. When that love need is not met, we have fears of all kinds. We have difficulty with our conscience. We have poor boundaries or walls. Let me just talk a little bit about boundaries and walls. It's important to have personal space and personal boundaries. People who have not had this love need met or protection, most of us have built walls. And with walls, with a boundary, it's semi-permeable. Things come in and go out. Or I can move my boundary, or I can move it further out. I can move it in or out. With the wall, it's pretty static, and nothing gets in except you throw it over the wall. And many of us have built walls around our hearts, around our ability to connect and have relationships with other people when we ought to have appropriate boundaries. Make sense? Okay. Discipline, very, very important. Discipline. Many of us, I would wager, in this room probably have been punished. But discipline is different than punishment. Discipline is about looking back at what you've done to violate a rule or a standard. Punishment, which is where we get, it comes from the root word disciple, which is a learner. I'm teaching you. But a disciple is a learner. I want to teach my child to learn from experience, to learn from mistakes. We had a rule in our house. Everybody, you know, washed dishes or had chores. And both my sons were really, really slow at responding to chores. And my desire was, I'm not going to control you and tell you when you have to get your chores done, just as long as they get done. So week in the kitchen, I don't care when you do your dishes, they just have to be done. I'm an early riser. I'm one of those people that sing in the morning when I wake up. And 5 o'clock is when I get up. And if the kitchen is not clean, I'm going to wake you up at 5 instead of 6:30. So you get to decide. So however you want to do this. And so not really knowing that their mother was really going to take them, you know, do what she said. A couple of times they did not do that. And so what did I do? I'd go in the kitchen and see, oh my goodness, the kitchen is not clean, or it was half cleaned. I would just go right in their room, and I had this little morning song. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's time to rise and shine. And it's like, oh, Mom, what time is it? 5 o'clock? What are you doing in here? The kitchen's not clean, so you got to get up and get it now. Mom, can I get it when I wake? Nope, right now. And it only took a couple of times of doing that when they got the point, oh, she means that. And so there was no, I'm not going to punish you, none of that. This is it. This is the consequence of your choice. And I was trying to throw my body across the door so that they would learn the lesson of being responsible. And so I'm throwing my body across the door when we talk about what are some of the rules that we can come up with. We believe in families having family meetings and coming up with family consequences, not parents saying, well, I'm going to lay this on you. What do you think would be a good consequence? Michael, our youngest son, got a speeding ticket, but one of the consequences was that if you get a speeding ticket, you're going to lose your driving privileges. So it's your choice, you know, kudos, have fun, but you get a speeding ticket, you're toast. You got a speeding ticket going 100 miles an hour on the freeway, and this was poor timing. Senior year in boarding school, was ready to go back to school in a couple of days, and he was ready to take his car stayed home that semester. It was like, remember, we had this agreement, speeding ticket. So the discipline here, I'm trying to help you to know that there are consequences to your behavior. Did you have consequences, or were you punished? And punishment, again, oftentimes I got spanked because my parents were embarrassed because of what I did. Not because they were necessarily concerned about me, but you're embarrassing me. Well, the truth is, I can't make parents feel anything. You can't make people feel anything. It's people's responsibility to choose how they feel. So discipline is a very important love need. God disciplines us. It's not about punishing us in the sense of punishing, but he's trying to, in essence, he erected Calvary so that we would see the awfulness of sin and choose something else. And so when that love need is met, we develop a balance of mercy and justice, and we have a sense of fairness, and we're released from guilt. I do something wrong. Guilt is different than shame. Guilt says I have violated a standard. I'm going to bring my life in harmony with that standard, and the guilt is resolved. Shame says, no, you didn't violate the standard. You are the mistake. You're the one that's messed up, and that's the problem. But with discipline, when that love need is not met, we develop bitterness, rebellion against authority, and we have what is called lingering guilt. And we have two more love needs to run through right quick. And what we don't finish, we'll pick it up right after lunch, because this is really a very, very important idea. You can understand in a very practical way how when God said, visiting the iniquity of the fathers to the children, we really want you to understand how that happens. It just doesn't, a lot of theological concepts we believe in, we don't know how it happens. And so we want to take the time to build a case here. This is a love need that's close to my heart, and it's called comfort. We don't have, in our vernacular, the idea that you can pray to God for comfort except when someone dies or when someone is hurt. We'll pray that God will comfort you. We'll pray that you'll be comforted by his presence. Those kinds of prayers we can say. But when I talk to people and I'm listening to them, and maybe you've had this experience where you talk to people and they're telling you something that happened in their past, and you'll say, just in terms of trying to understand a story or getting the context, and you'll say, when did that happen? And they say 20 years ago. You ever had those experiences where people sound like it just happened yesterday, but it was a much longer time? Well, those are the experiences where people really need comfort. They need the comfort of God. Let me give you a personal example. So my birthday's in January. My favorite aunt bought me a coat at the end of the season, and I love that coat. I can still see it. It was just a beautiful coat. Loved it. And so when I found out I was pregnant, my friend told me, you're going to ruin any clothes you have. You can't wear them while you're pregnant. And so the first thing I thought about was this this coat. And so I was going to be pregnant during the winter. And so I went to my mother and I said, listen, I have to get another coat because I don't want to wear the coat Aunt Mamie gave me because it's going to be messed up. My mother said, that's not my problem. I don't really care. I can't afford to buy you another coat. So you got to wear that coat. And so I did wear it, and sure enough, I stretched that coat out, and I wore it for 2 subsequent winters after having Eric. And every time I would wear that coat, it felt like the scarlet letter A. You know, the coat was stretched out. You could see where, you know, the stretch mark of the coat. And then as I began, I started getting asked to speak about, you know, what it was like to be a teenage mother, and I was always the youngest mother at programs, at church, or wherever I was, and I would always tell my story, you know, about what happened. And I mentioned last night my mother dropped me off at the hospital, didn't stay with me in labor and delivery, and you know, I would share all those things. But when I got to the story about the coat, I would start crying every time. As we started in ministry, and we're now traveling the country, and every time I got to the story of the coat, I would just tear up and cry. And David and I were talking one Saturday night, and it's like, what is that about? I had no idea. I had done a lot of work around my relationship with my mother and my father, and I just had no idea about what it meant. And as we were talking back and forth, I realized that I had never forgiven my mother specifically about the coat. Specifically. Not just, you know, wow, you left me in the hospital to have this baby by myself, but it was the coat. And because the coat represented what happened to me. I wore that like a badge of shame for the next 2 or 3 winters. And so that particular experience, and I had never asked God to comfort me. I had never said, Lord, comfort me. I was grieving the loss of my coat. That was a really special coat brought to me by my very special aunt. And so once I prayed, David and I prayed that Saturday night. And after that, I remember just feeling so pleased that God had really touched me and did what he said he would do. He is the God of all comfort who knows how to comfort us. And it doesn't matter what those things are. You know, it could be, we had to move from Huntsville to Michigan, and I left my favorite house. It was my dream house, and I left it to move to a smaller house and an older house, and it was a grief process, and I had to pray for comfort. He is the God of all comfort. And so when I'm listening to people and I hear, you know, those kind of stories that people, I hear pain in their story, in their telling of the story, I know I can even, again, I'm a counselor, I know to do this, but I want to encourage you to think about the times in your life where you needed comfort and you didn't get it. And he is the God of all comfort who wants to comfort our hearts. Isn't that good news? And so whatever it is, the business of children is to play. And you lose your favorite toy or you break your favorite toy, you're sad by it. The God of all comfort wants to comfort you. And as a parent, that's our job. This is what God does. He comforts us in all of our afflictions, in all of our pain. I'm sorry, it's a little early for me to start preaching, but I get excited about this because he is a God. The God who stood on my yesterday, he stands on my today, and he stands on my tomorrow. And that God of yesterday, he can reach back and touch my yesterday and touch my experience of my yesterday. And he's an awesome God. I can't thank him enough for what he's done. So, the God of all comfort. And when you have that love need met, you have the ability to forgive. I did not have a forgiving gene in my body. And I can understand that because there were so many areas in my life. I had never been comforted about being sexually abused. I had never been, nobody ever said anything to me about it. I had never been comforted about being left in a room to have a baby by myself for 20 hours. I had never been comforted about those things. And so when I realized, man, he is the God who wants to comfort me, now I can pray that prayer with confidence knowing he's going to do it. So I struggle to forgive. And reconciliation, oh, who wants to reconcile? I don't want to reconcile with anybody. Absolutely not. and compassion and empathy, and having the ability to comfort other people. And more importantly, when that love need is met, we learn it's okay to feel. I was a rough and tough, and you know, I got it going on kind of sister. I'm tough. I don't need anybody. I'm good. And that message was very deeply grounded in this lack of comfort. When we don't have that love need met, as I've just given you plenty of examples, difficulty with forgiveness, blocked feelings, difficulty comprehending the beauty of the cross, and we certainly have lack of comfort. And finally, guidance. We need to be guided. I went to my mother, I wanted to go to college. I'm 18, Eric is 4. I really wanted to go to college. She wanted me to go to college. But there was absolutely no help in figuring out where I wanted to go. I told you I wanted to be a nurse because of the nurse who cared for me during my delivery. And I wanted to go to college. I didn't want to go to community college. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to Oakwood. My mother said that's too far away from home. And she was really intent on my really taking responsibility for Eric, and I really appreciate that. And so I was able to go away to home, from home a couple hours away to a university a couple hours away. But I found the school, I found the money, I did everything. I worked hard all summer to get the funds to go to school, to buy things I needed. And so there was no guidance. I didn't have any guidance. How many of you all had guidance, somebody to say, not control you. I'm not talking about control. We're not talking about telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it. We're talking about offering guidance. By the way, control is never a good thing for parents, and maybe we'll have time to talk about that some more. But just offering guidance. When you have guidance in your life, you have appreciation for experience. You have appreciation for senior citizens who have a lot of experience. You have that respect for your parents, and you have a sense of direction. And when you don't have guidance in your life, you have difficulty with reasoning from cause to effect. And you develop self-dependence, and you're indecisive. So, I'm so sorry. We could spend the whole hour just talking about those love needs. Okay, go to structures. Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, now I'm going to try to make this switch here. So, these children are born in this family with these love needs. And that's you and me. We were born in these families with these love needs. We're going to have to go out of order and pick some more up when we come back this afternoon. When my love needs are not met, instead of sitting around thinking about, I'm not loved, I have been abandoned. We talked about having blocked feelings. What I learned to do, what you learn to do, is to build what we call structures in your life in order to survive it. Nobody wants to sit around thinking, I feel abandoned all day, so I'm not going to, I don't want to feel that. So I learned to build structures in my life to keep myself out of feelings that I'm going to feel as a result of my love needs not being met. And so I'm going to do things like I am going to be self-dependent. Mentioned that was one of the things that happens when our love need is not met. I don't really need anybody. And even thinking about my need, even needing God can be, it's the Christian thing to do. I'm supposed to tell you I need God. But when my car breaks down, I don't pray and say, Lord, what should I do? I just flip out my credit card and get my car fixed. Or if I am struggling about a decision, my first thought is not necessarily to consult God. I just will strike out on my own and then say, oh yeah, God, will you bless what I've chosen? And so we learn to be self-dependent. Another structure that we have, I don't know what order you have, control. When things are so out of control and so chaotic in our lives, what we'll do is try to gain control. And so because I can't control my mother and my father and the chaos that's in my home, I am going to control. I'm going to control my environment. I'm going to control my feelings. Nobody's going to know how I feel. I'm going to suck it up and tuck them down. But more importantly, I'm going to control my environment. I'm going to be the center of my universe, and I'm even going to try to control God and tell God. And again, we're not doing this consciously in terms of, God, I want to tell you what to do, because we know the language. You're supposed to say, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," right? And my faith has found a resting place. We sing those songs and we really mean them, but the problem is our brains are wired. These experiences that happen the first 7 years of our life, and we're trying to survive those first 7 years of life, we build these structures way back the first 7 years of life, and they become a default way of responding. David and I were talking about David's first response is no. David, can we do such and such and such and such? No. And so I know that. And so the first thing I'm going to get is no, and I let him have that no. And then I come back, and then we'll process some more, and he'll move. But the first response is going to be no. My first response is, I'm coming up fighting. I'm fighting. No questions asked. I'm fighting. And David says, yeah, you take names later. Yeah, I'm fighting. What? You say no to me? Oh, no, absolutely not. And so I know that's my first response. I'm in the middle of something, an issue right now, and I was ready to send the email on Thursday, and my son told me, Mother, that's like playing checkers. You want to play chess, not no, I want to play checkers. I want to send this email right now. I don't want to play chess. And no, Mom, you need to play chess in this particular situation. And David and I were laughing, yeah, you just want to come out fighting. Absolutely. And so I know that about me. And so I can say, well, Lord, I learned that very early. That's why I survived what I survived. I was resilient, and fighting worked for me way back in the day in order to survive living in that family. We mentioned about performance. I'm performing. If I just do this, if I look this way, if I act like this, if I respond this way, if I get this education, then maybe I will be somebody. Maybe I will be okay. And we do those kinds of things trying to perform to feel that we're okay, and we're doing it to stay out of our feelings that happen as a result of our love needs not being met. The victim mindset, let me just talk a little bit about the victim mindset. And again, I want to say that each one of these things, we could spend an hour on each one of these things, so we're zooming through this. But the victim mentality is this. Let me tell you how the victim thing dresses up and goes to church. I'm in the process of making a decision. I don't really want to make a decision. I want God to tell me what to do. And then I'm just waiting. And you know the story about God sends the lifeboat and the person doesn't get it. And then God sends the what do you call it? The life jacket. He sends all these things, and we say, no, I'm waiting on God. That's what the victim does. I struggle to make a decision. To make a decision means I have to take responsibility. And oftentimes the victim says, I don't really see a choice, so I have to let things happen to me. And the language of a victim is, oh, Lord, ain't it awful? Look at what is happening to me. And man, I got to do this. And what else could I do? I had to do this. And when I'm listening to a victim, and hearing those languages, the watchword is you always have a choice. Even though when you were little, you didn't have that choice. It felt like you didn't have a choice. It was first 7 years of life, and you developed this mindset. What can I do? Things happen to me. I can't do anything about it. We talked about the fight or flight. Some people run. And what is that? Oh, we comfort ourselves. And we comfort ourselves. Now, we do that in a variety of ways. And let's talk about the socially unacceptable ways that people comfort themselves. For example, we comfort ourselves by using drugs. I don't know if you have the problem that we have in the States with opiates up here and methamphetamines. Huge problem. Right? People are dying left and right from the opioid addiction and, of course, the methamphetamine, all those things. And we comfort ourselves with those things. We comfort ourselves with food. We comfort ourselves with drugs. We comfort ourselves with shopping. You know, it's not just the socially unacceptable ways, but we comfort ourselves with chocolate. We comfort ourselves. Even we can use God as a medicator. Okay, I can just, you know, I had a woman who just used God. She made no decisions. She just would go to church and spent, she's not of our persuasion, but, you know, she's in church every day. And it was her way of avoiding life. And so I had a friend who was addicted to perennial flowers. And just her garden was full of perennial flowers. So we find a lot of different ways to comfort ourselves. And again, the pain is so bad from not having our love needs met, then we have to figure out a way to how to live with that. And we do those things by comforting ourselves. It's now time for us to wind down. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to seek to finish this. We really think it's important.
We have a couple minutes to finish.
Okay, finish it, honey.
Okay. When a person's just surviving and you are at the stage where you're seeking a relationship for yourself, who do you think you're going to be attracted to? A real healthy person? We're going to be attracted to someone about the same level of health that we are. And so if we are simply surviving, if we haven't had our love needs met, we're going to be attracted to someone just like that. And when we have children, what are we going to pass along to our children? You can't give your kids something that you don't have, can you? And so that's how the cycle of dysfunction continues. The iniquities get passed along from one generation to another generation until the cycle is broken. And we want to propose to you, and that's what we're going to be talking about later on in the sermon today, that God is about breaking cycles. Jesus is about intervening in this cycle of dysfunction, because that's what redemption is all about. That's what resurrection life is all about. It's about learning to thrive, fully live in the freedom that God has given us, rather than simply settling for surviving in life. It's good news. The gospel is really real. It's not just the spiritual thing, but it applies to real human life. And we're going to explore that later on during the sermon.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Glad to have you all here. Please join us as we begin our praise service and as we enter the worship service this morning.